You're a disappointment. Those were the last words my father said before throwing my suitcase onto the front lawn. Not, "We'll miss you." Not, "Good luck." Just, "You're a failure. Don't come crawling back when life teaches you how useless you really are." I was 23. I had exactly $47 in my checking account, a broken laptop, one suitcase full of clothes, and nowhere to go. My older brother stood on the porch with his arms crossed, smiling like he just won something. My younger sister wouldn't even look me in the eyes. My mother? She cried, not because I was leaving, because, according to her, I had embarrassed the family. I remember standing there in the rain staring at the house I'd grown up in. The house where I'd spent 23 years trying to earn love that always seemed reserved for everyone else. I wanted to scream, to ask why nothing I did was ever enough, why my mistakes became family legends while everyone else's were quietly forgiven, why my brother could fail college twice and still be called the future of the family, while I graduated, worked 2 jobs, paid my own bills, and somehow still became the failure. But I didn't scream. I picked up my suitcase, walked away, and promised myself something. One day, I'd build a life so good, they'd regret ever making me feel small. I kept that promise. It took 12 years, thousands of sleepless nights, countless failures, more tears than anyone ever saw. But eventually, I became everything they said I'd never be: successful, respected, financially free. The funny thing about success, it has a way of making people remember your phone number, especially relatives who once pretended you didn't exist. The first call came from my mother, then my sister, then my brother, then cousins I hadn't spoken to in over a decade. Every single conversation started the same way. "We're family." Funny, because family was the one thing they stopped calling me, the day they decided I wasn't worth believing in. What they didn't know was that I already knew why they were calling, and by the time the truth came out, it would destroy everything they had spent years pretending was perfect. If you've ever been treated like the family disappointment, only to discover their love had conditions, then stay with me. Because this story isn't just about revenge, it's about discovering that sometimes the people who share your blood are the ones who deserve the least access to your heart. Chapter 1. The Golden Child and the Black Sheep. Every family has roles. Somebody becomes the hero. Somebody becomes the peacemaker. Somebody becomes invisible. And somebody becomes the problem. In my family, that someone was me. I don't think I was born the black sheep. I became one, slowly. One comparison at a time. One disappointment at a time. One impossible expectation after another. My name is Ethan Carter. I'm 35 now. But this story begins when I was 8 years old. I still remember report card day. I burst through the front door waving my grades. "Mom, Dad, I got all A's." I was smiling so hard my cheeks hurt. Dad glanced up from the television. "Good." That was it. Just good. Before I could sit down, the front door opened again. My older brother Ryan walked inside. He tossed his backpack on the floor. Dad immediately stood. "How'd the baseball tryouts go?" Ryan grinned. "I made the team." Dad laughed. "That's my boy." He hugged him. Actually hugged him. Mom started clapping. "We're celebrating tonight." I looked down at the report card still in my hands. Nobody asked to see it. Nobody cared. That was the first time I realized something. Achievements mattered, but only when the right child earned them. It became the pattern of my childhood. Ryan scored 1 goal. The whole family went out for steak. I won the regional science competition. Mom asked if I'd remembered to take the trash out. My younger sister Emma wanted to learn piano. Dad bought her a brand new upright piano. I asked if I could join the robotics club. It's too expensive. The membership fee was $80. 3 weeks later, Dad spent $800 upgrading Ryan's baseball equipment. When I pointed it out, Mom sighed dramatically. Why do you always make everything about money? I stared at her. Because it was about money. Or rather, who they believed deserved it. By high school, I'd stopped asking for things. Instead, I worked. At 15, I stocked shelves at a grocery store every weekend. At 16, I tutored math students. At 17, I delivered newspapers before school. Not because I wanted spending money, because if I wanted new shoes, I bought them. If I needed school supplies, I paid for them. When graduation came, I finished second in my class. I received a partial university scholarship. I thought, finally, maybe now they'd be proud. Dad looked at the acceptance letter. Only partial? I blinked. What? You still have to pay tuition? Yes. Ryan, meanwhile, had dropped out of community college after one semester. Dad shrugged. College isn't for everyone. I couldn't believe it. So when Ryan quits, it's understandable. But when I earn a scholarship, it's not enough. Dad's face hardened. Watch your attitude. Mom folded the acceptance letter. You've always been difficult. Difficult. That word followed me my entire life. Not lazy, not irresponsible, not selfish. Just difficult. Because asking for fairness apparently made me the problem. College wasn't easy. I attended classes during the day, worked evenings at a warehouse, delivered food at night. Sometimes I slept 3 hours, sometimes less. Every month, I sent money home. Why? Because Dad said the family was struggling. We all have to sacrifice. So I did. Then I came home one Christmas. Ryan had a brand new pickup truck sitting in the driveway. I stared at it. Whose is that? Dad smiled proudly. Ryan's. I thought money was tight. It is. So, Dad frowned. He needed reliable transportation. I laughed. Actually laughed. I've been taking 2 buses to campus for 3 years. Mom's expression turned cold. There you go again. What? Keeping score. I looked around the room. No, I wasn't keeping score. Life already had. And somehow, the final result was always the same. Ryan won. I lost, even before the game started. By the time I graduated, I had no savings. Every dollar I'd earned had gone toward tuition, rent, bills, or helping my family. Ryan still lived at home. Dad paid his insurance, his phone, his groceries, everything. Yet somehow, I was the irresponsible one, the failure. I just didn't know. The worst betrayal was still waiting for me. Chapter 2. The Savings. My grandmother left me. People say betrayal always comes from enemies. They're wrong. The deepest betrayals come from the people you trust the most, the people who smile at you across the dinner table, the people who tell you they love you, the people who call themselves family. I didn't discover the truth until the spring semester of my senior year in college. I had just finished an exhausting 12-hour shift unloading trucks at a warehouse. My back ached. My hands were covered in tiny cuts from cardboard boxes. I hadn't slept more than 4 hours in 2 days. As I was changing out of my work boots, my phone rang. It was the university's financial office. Hello, may I speak with Ethan Carter? This is Ethan. Mr. Carter, we're calling regarding your outstanding tuition balance. I frowned. There must be some mistake. I'm afraid there isn't. I submitted the payment. Our records show we never received it. I stopped walking. That's impossible. The deadline is in 5 days. I'll figure it out. I hung up, confused. There was only one place that money could have come from. The account my grandmother left me. Grandma Evelyn had opened it when I was 12 years old. She believed education was the one thing no one could ever take away from you. Every birthday, every Christmas, every extra dollar she could spare, she quietly deposited into that account. When she became sick, she made me promise something: never quit school, never let anyone convince me I wasn't good enough. After her funeral, Dad insisted on helping me manage the account. "You're busy with classes. I'll make sure everything gets paid." I never questioned him. Why would I? He was my father. The next morning, I went straight to the bank. The woman behind the counter smiled politely. "What can I help you with today?" "I'd like to check the balance on my education account." She typed for a few moments, then her smile disappeared. "I'm sorry. There seems to be an issue." "What kind of issue?" "The account was closed." I laughed nervously. "No, it can't be." She turned her monitor slightly. The balance read 0. Every withdrawal was listed, thousands of dollars, one after another. The final transaction. 11 months ago. I stared at the screen. "I don't understand." She looked sympathetic. "The withdrawals were authorized." "By who?" "I'm sorry, I can't disclose that." "My name is on the account." There was also a joint account holder. I already knew the answer before she said it. "My father." She nodded slowly. "I'm sorry." I couldn't hear anything after that. My ears rang, my chest tightened. It felt like the floor beneath me had disappeared. Grandma had spent nearly 15 years saving that money. 15 years gone. I drove home without remembering the trip. Dad was sitting in his recliner watching baseball. Mom was folding laundry. Ryan was outside washing his truck. The truck. The truck I'd never stopped wondering how he could suddenly afford. I threw the bank statement onto the coffee table. Dad barely looked up. "What?" "Where's Grandma's money?" He sighed. Oh, you knew. We used it." My entire body froze. "You what?" "We used it." Mom interrupted before I could speak. "Don't raise your voice." I looked at her in disbelief. "You stole Grandma's money." "We didn't steal anything." Dad finally muted the television. "It stayed in the family. It was my education fund. The family needed help." "What family?" Dad pointed toward the driveway. "Ryan needed transportation." I slowly turned toward the window. Ryan's shiny blue pickup sat outside. The truck. Everything suddenly made sense. The expensive tires, the custom wheels, the new stereo. I whispered, "You bought him a truck." "With Grandma's money?" Dad crossed his arms. "He needed reliable transportation." "So did I. I take 2 buses every morning. I work nights. I barely sleep. I eat instant noodles because I can't afford groceries." "And you spent my college fund on him?" Mom spoke softly. "You'll make more money someday." I laughed, not because it was funny, because I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Grandma trusted me." "No, she trusted you. And this is what you did?" Ryan finally walked inside. "What's going on?" Dad answered calmly. "He found out." Ryan's face turned pale. "You didn't tell him?" Dad shrugged. "He was going to find out eventually." Ryan looked at me. "I'm sorry." I stared at him. "Were you? You knew where the money came from." You watched me work 70 hours a week. You watched me skip meals. You borrowed money from me. And you never once told me you were driving around in Grandma's inheritance." He couldn't meet my eyes. "I thought Dad would." "Pay it back." "When?" Silence. "When, Ryan?" No answer. Dad stood up. "That's enough?" "No, it's not enough. It'll never be enough. You robbed your own son." Dad's expression hardened. "I sacrificed everything for this family." "So did Grandma. The difference is, she sacrificed for me. You sacrificed me." Those words filled the room like thunder. Mom burst into tears. "There you go again, making us the villains." I looked around the room. Nobody looked ashamed. Nobody apologized. Nobody even denied it. In that moment, I realized something that would take years to fully understand. I wasn't part of this family. I was their backup plan, the responsible child, the dependable child, the one expected to survive with less, the one who would understand, the one who could be sacrificed. I folded the bank statement carefully, picked up my backpack, walked toward the door. Dad called after me. "Where are you going?" I didn't stop walking. "To build a life where no one gets to steal from me again." I closed the door behind me. I had no idea. That would be the last peaceful conversation we'd ever have. Chapter 3. The night they threw me out. The betrayal should have been enough. It wasn't. Sometimes, when people know they've done something wrong, instead of apologizing, they double down. For the next few weeks, the atmosphere inside the house became unbearable. Nobody talked about Grandma's money. Instead, everyone acted like I had done something terrible. Mom barely spoke to me. Dad criticized everything I did. Ryan stayed out of my way. Emma avoided eye contact altogether. It was as if confronting them had become the real crime. One Friday evening, I came home after another long shift. The lights in the dining room were on. Everyone was sitting at the table, waiting. Dad folded his hands. "Sit down." Something about his voice made my stomach tighten. I sat. Mom wouldn't look at me. Ryan stared at his plate. Emma looked nervous. Dad slid an envelope across the table. Inside, a bill. The remaining tuition balance, nearly $12,000. "You need to pay this." "I know. You've embarrassed this family." I blinked. "What?" "The university called." "They called because the payment wasn't made." Dad leaned forward. "And whose fault is that?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You spent the money!" His fist slammed against the table. "I said enough!" Mom finally spoke. "If you had been more grateful..." I stared at her. "More grateful? For what? For stealing from me?" Ryan rubbed his forehead. "Dad, maybe we should calm down." Dad shot him a look. "No. He needs to hear this." He pointed directly at me. "You've always thought you were better than this family." "I never said that. You didn't have to. You judge us. You question everything. You keep score." I shook my head slowly. I asked for fairness. "You call that judging?" Dad stood up. "If you're so unhappy here, leave." The room went silent. Mom whispered, "Frank," but he didn't stop. "You think you're smarter than everyone? You think you don't need us? Fine. Go prove it." I looked at Mom. She didn't defend me. I looked at Ryan. He looked away. I looked at Emma. Tears rolled down her cheeks. But she said nothing. Nobody said, "Don't go." Nobody said, "This is your home." Dad walked to the front closet. He grabbed my old suitcase, opened the front door, and threw it onto the lawn. The rain had just started. Water splashed across the driveway. Dad looked me straight in the eyes. "You've got until I count to 10. For a second, I honestly believed someone would stop him. Mom, Ryan, Emma, anyone. 1, 2, 3. Nobody moved. 4, 5. Mom quietly cried into a tissue. 6. Ryan stared at the floor. 7. Emma closed her eyes. 8. Dad pointed toward the door. 9. I stood up, walked to my bedroom, packed everything I owned into one suitcase. Clothes, my old laptop, a framed picture of Grandma, a notebook filled with business ideas, $47 in my wallet. That was it. As I walked past the dining room, Dad never looked at me. Mom finally spoke. "I hope someday you understand why this happened." I stopped, turned around. "No, I understand perfectly. You chose comfort over character. You chose favorites over family. And one day, when you need me, I hope you remember tonight." Dad laughed. "We'll never need you." I picked up my suitcase, walked into the rain. The front door slammed behind me. I stood there for several seconds, looking at the only home I'd ever known. Then I turned around. and walked away. I didn't know where I would sleep. I didn't know how I would finish college. I didn't know how I would survive. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I would never beg those people for anything again. That night, I slept on a friend's couch with my suitcase beside me and Grandma's photograph clutched against my chest. Before I closed my eyes, I made myself a promise. One day, I would build a life so successful that the people who called me a failure would have no choice but to watch from the outside. I had no idea that promise would take more than a decade to fulfill, nor did I know that the day my family finally came looking for me, it wouldn't be because they missed me. It would be because they needed something only I could give. Chapter 4. Building a life from rock bottom. The first night after my father threw me out, I barely slept. Not because the couch at my friend Jake's apartment was uncomfortable, because every time I closed my eyes, I heard my father's voice. "You're a failure." Those 3 words echoed louder than the traffic outside. Around 6 in the morning, Jake walked into the living room carrying 2 mugs of coffee. "You've been awake all night, haven't you?" I forced a smile. "Is it that obvious?" He handed me one of the mugs. "You can stay here for a while." "I can't." "Why not?" "I don't want to become someone else's burden." Jake laughed. "You've helped me pass calculus 3 times. I think I owe you a couch." For the first time in days, I smiled. A real smile. It didn't last long. Over the next few weeks, reality hit me harder than ever. I worked at the warehouse from 6 in the evening until 6 in the morning, attended classes during the day, delivered food on weekends, tutored high school students whenever I could. There were days I survived on peanut butter sandwiches because they were cheaper than hot meals. Sometimes I skipped dinner entirely so I could afford gasoline. I learned how to calculate every dollar before spending it. Coffee, luxury, movie tickets, impossible. New clothes, only if something ripped beyond repair. Every decision became a choice between surviving today or surviving tomorrow. Yet, strangely, I had never felt more free. No one criticized me. No one compared me to Ryan. No one reminded me I wasn't enough. I was exhausted. But I was finally living for myself. 3 months later, I graduated, not with honors, not because I wasn't capable, because I had spent more time working than sleeping. Still, when they called my name across the stage, I looked up toward the audience. Jake stood and applauded. His parents stood beside him. They cheered louder than anyone else in the auditorium. The seats where my family should have been were empty. For a brief moment, that hurt. Then I remembered something Grandma used to tell me. The people who matter will always find a way to show up. She was right. Family isn't always the people who share your blood. Sometimes it's the people who refuse to let you stand alone. After graduation, I landed an entry-level accounting job. The salary wasn't impressive, $42,000 a year. But to me, it felt like winning the lottery. I rented a tiny studio apartment. The kitchen was so small I could cook dinner without taking more than 2 steps. The ceiling leaked whenever it rained. The heater barely worked. But every time I unlocked the door, I smiled. It was mine. Nobody could throw me out. Nobody could tell me I didn't belong. One evening, nearly a year after graduation, I stayed late at work helping organize financial records. Everyone else had gone home. Except one man, Mr. Daniel Harper, the company's chief financial officer. He was in his late 60s, always calm, always observant. He walked past my desk and noticed I was still there. "You know it's almost 10 o'clock. "I know." "You get paid overtime?" I laughed. "No." "Then why are you still here?" I shrugged. "I want to learn." He stared at me for several seconds, then smiled. "Come to my office." I wasn't sure what I'd done wrong. Instead, he poured 2 cups of coffee. "Tell me something, Ethan." "Why accounting?" I hesitated. Because numbers don't lie. He raised an eyebrow. People do. He nodded slowly. I know that feeling. That conversation lasted 3 hours. He asked about my life, my goals, my dreams. For the first time, someone listened without interrupting. When I finished telling him everything, he leaned back in his chair. You know what your problem is? I laughed. I've heard that question before. No. Your problem is that you've spent your entire life proving people wrong. He paused. You should spend the rest of it proving yourself right. Those words changed something inside me. From that night on, Mr. Harper became more than a boss. He became the mentor I'd never had. He taught me about investing, business, leadership, negotiation. Most importantly, he taught me to stop chasing approval. Success, he said one afternoon, isn't getting revenge. It's becoming so fulfilled that revenge no longer interests you. Over the next 8 years, my life changed, promotion after promotion. Better opportunities, smart investments, a small consulting business on weekends. Then another. Then another. I wasn't becoming rich overnight. I was becoming disciplined. While others spent to impress strangers, I invested. While others complained, I learned. While others waited for opportunity, I built it. By the time I turned 35, I owned 2 successful financial consulting firms, 3 rental properties, a beautiful home overlooking the lake, no debt, no financial worries. The boy who had once counted coins for dinner had quietly become a millionaire. Not because I was lucky, because every insult, every rejection, every sleepless night had become fuel. Sometimes I wondered whether my family ever thought about me. Then I realized it didn't matter anymore, or at least that's what I believed. Until one Tuesday afternoon, when my phone rang, the caller ID displayed a name I hadn't seen in over 10 years. Mom. Chapter 5. The phone call they never thought they'd make. I stared at the phone. It kept ringing. Mom. 10 years. Not a birthday, not a Christmas card, not even a text message asking if I was alive. Now, she was calling. I almost ignored it. Instead, I answered. Hello? Silence, then a shaky voice. Ethan? Yes. Oh, it's really you. I closed my office door. What do you need? She sounded hurt. That's the first thing you ask? It seemed like the right question. Another silence. I've missed you. I looked out the window. The city skyline stretched for miles. Funny how distance can make memories clearer. No. You missed something? What do you mean? You missed having access to me. She inhaled sharply. Ethan, I'm your mother. You stopped acting like one a long time ago. She began crying, real tears, or at least they sounded real. I know we made mistakes. Mistakes? You emptied Grandma's account. You watched Dad throw me into the rain. You never called. Those aren't mistakes. They're choices, she whispered. We didn't know where you were. I almost laughed. My phone number hasn't changed. My email hasn't changed. I've lived in the same city for years. You didn't look. She couldn't answer. Finally, she asked quietly, Can we meet? Why? Please. I just want to see my son. I closed my eyes. For a moment, I pictured the woman who used to read bedtime stories, the mother who packed my school lunches, the one who disappeared the moment I became inconvenient. When? Tomorrow. I'll think about it. Before hanging up, she said something strange. Your father doesn't know I called. It caught my attention. Why not? He wouldn't approve. Interesting. Then the line went dead. The next morning I arrived at a small cafe 15 minutes early. Old habits, always early. Mom walked in exactly on time. She looked older, much older. Gray streaks ran through her hair. The confidence she once carried had disappeared. She smiled nervously. "Ethan." I stood. We didn't hug. She seemed to notice. "You look so different. So do you." We ordered coffee. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Finally, she reached across the table. "I really am sorry." I didn't move. "For what?" She looked confused. "And for everything." "No. Be specific." She swallowed. "The money." "What else?" She looked down. "The way your father treated you." "What else?" Her voice became quieter. "We should have defended you." "What else?" Tears formed again. "We chose Ryan." Those words hung in the air. At least she admitted it. "Why?" She wiped her eyes. "Because it was easier." I frowned. "Easier?" "Ryan demanded everything. You never asked for much. We convinced ourselves you'd be okay." "And were you right?" She couldn't answer. Instead, she looked around the cafe as if searching for courage. "Your father lost his business." I said nothing. "Ryan invested in a restaurant. It failed. Still, I remained silent. We mortgaged the house." My coffee suddenly tasted bitter. "We're going to lose everything." There it was, the truth, not love, not regret, need. She reached into her purse and pulled out several documents. "I know this is unfair, but you're successful now. I've seen the articles, the interviews, the awards. You've done so well." I looked at the papers, loan notices, past due bills, foreclosure warnings. Then she whispered the sentence I'd expected from the moment I saw her name on my phone. "We need your help." I leaned back in my chair. For 10 years, I had imagined this moment. I thought I would feel angry, satisfied, victorious. Instead, I felt something else. Disappointment. Because deep down, a small part of me had hoped she came simply because she wanted her son back. Instead, she had come looking for the man they once called a failure. The same man who had become their last hope. I folded the papers neatly and slid them back across the table. Then I looked my mother in the eyes. "I'll listen. But before we talk about money, we're going to talk about the night you watched Dad throw me out." Her face turned pale. For the first time in years, my family was finally going to hear my side of the story, and they weren't going to be able to interrupt. Chapter 6. They suddenly remembered I was family. My mother sat silently across from me. The cafe had grown louder around us, but all I could hear was the ticking of the clock on the wall. She had asked for money. I had asked for the truth. Neither of us had gotten what we wanted. Finally, she whispered, "What do you want to know?" I folded my hands. "I want you to tell me why nobody stopped Dad that night." She lowered her eyes. "I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Your father controlled everything. The money, the house, every decision." "So you let him throw your son into the street?" Tears streamed down her face. "I told myself you'd be okay." I gave a bitter smile. "That's what everyone always told themselves." She nodded. "You were always the strong one." "No, I was the one who had no choice." For several moments, neither of us spoke. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out an old photograph. It was from my high school graduation. I was standing in my cap and gown. Dad had one hand on Ryan's shoulder. Mom was smiling at the camera. I was standing at the edge of the picture, almost cropped out. "I found this while cleaning," she said softly. I realized something. "What?" "You were always standing at the edge." I looked at the picture for a long time before sliding it back to her. It wasn't the photograph. It was my place in the family. That evening, as I returned to my office, my assistant knocked on the door. "Mr. Carter?" "Yes?" "There's someone here asking for you." "Who?" She hesitated. "He says he's your brother." "Ryan." I hadn't seen him in over 10 years. When I stepped into the reception area, I barely recognized him. The confident man with the expensive truck was gone. His suit was wrinkled. Dark circles hung beneath his eyes. He stood as soon as he saw me. Ethan, Ryan, neither of us moved to hug. I know this is awkward. That's one word for it. He gave an embarrassed smile. You've done well. I've worked hard. He nodded. I know. There was an uncomfortable silence. Finally, he said, I'm sorry. I studied his face. For what? For everything. You'll have to be more specific, he sighed. The truck. The money. Letting Dad blame you for everything. I should have told you the truth years ago. Why didn't you? His shoulders slumped. Because I liked being the favorite. The honesty surprised me. I won't lie to you anymore. I enjoyed the attention. I convinced myself I'd pay it all back someday. But someday never came. I asked quietly, why are you really here? He looked down. Dad doesn't know I came. Neither did Mom. I know. He rubbed his hands together nervously. Our house is weeks away from foreclosure. The restaurant failed. My marriage ended. Dad's business collapsed. We're drowning. And he still refuses to admit he was wrong. I wasn't surprised. Ryan looked at me. I didn't come to ask for money. I raised an eyebrow. I came because Dad is planning to. That caught my attention. He won't apologize. He thinks being your father means you owe him. I couldn't help but laugh. He really believes that? Ryan nodded slowly. He says everything you have is because he made you tough. I stared out the window. Funny. The man who made my life harder believed he deserved credit for the life I built despite him. Before leaving, Ryan stopped at the door. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to hear the truth from me. As he walked away, I realized something. For the first time in our lives, my brother had stopped pretending, but the hardest conversation was still waiting. Because my father had finally decided to call. Chapter 7. The lies, the guilt, and the pressure. My phone rang the next afternoon. The caller ID simply read, Dad. I let it ring twice before answering. Hello? His voice sounded exactly the same, firm, confident, demanding. So, I hear you're doing well. No greeting, no apology, just business. What do you want, Dad? I want to see you. Why? We're family. I closed my eyes. There it is. What? The word you haven't used in over 10 years. He ignored the comment. Your mother says you've become successful. She also says you refuse to help. I refuse to write a blank check. His tone sharpened. After everything we've done for you, I interrupted. What exactly did you do for me? Silence. Then he answered. We raised you. You were legally required to. Another silence. I put a roof over your head. And then you threw me out from under it. His breathing grew heavier. You always twist things. No. I remember them. He finally said, meet me tomorrow. I'll think about it. No. Be there. The old command. The same voice that used to make everyone obey. It didn't work anymore. I'll choose whether I come. Then, I ended the call. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet him. Not for him. For me. I wanted to know whether people like my father were capable of change. We met at his favorite old diner. He arrived 10 minutes late. He looked older, but his pride hadn't aged a day. He sat down without smiling. So, you're rich now. I've done well. I always knew you had potential. I almost laughed. You called me a failure. I was motivating you. No. You were humiliating me. He waved his hand dismissively. Same difference. That single sentence told me everything. He hadn't changed. He didn't regret what he'd done. He regretted where it had left him. He leaned forward. The family's in trouble. I know. You've got money. I do. So, help us. I looked him in the eyes. Why? Because we're blood. I shook my head. Blood didn't matter when Grandma's money disappeared. It didn't matter when I was sleeping on someone else's couch. It didn't matter when you told me never to come back. His jaw tightened. You've become arrogant. No. I've learned boundaries. He pushed a folder toward me. These are the debts. I didn't even open it. He frowned. Don't you care what happens to your family? I do. I just don't confuse helping with enabling. He stood abruptly. So that's it? You're going to watch us lose everything? I stood as well. I watched you throw away our relationship. You watched me lose everything first. People in the diner had begun to stare. His face turned red. You owe me, I answered calmly. The only debt I ever had was Grandma's. And you spent that already. Without another word, I walked toward the exit. Behind me, I heard him shout, You'll regret this. I paused at the door but didn't turn around. No. I already lived my biggest regret. It was believing my family would love me if I just worked hard enough. I stepped outside into the afternoon sunlight. For the first time since that rainy night 10 years earlier, I felt something unexpected, not anger, not revenge, peace. But I also knew this wasn't over. Because families built on secrets rarely collapse quietly. And I had a feeling the biggest secret of all was still waiting to be uncovered. Chapter 8. The Truth They Tried to Bury. For days after my meeting with my father, the silence was almost unsettling. No calls, no messages, no surprise visits. I should have known it wouldn't last. Families like mine didn't know how to let go. They only knew how to regroup. One Thursday afternoon, my assistant told me an older woman named Margaret Lewis was here to see me. She introduced herself as Grandma Evelyn's best friend and handed me a small, worn leather box Grandma had entrusted to her before she died. Inside were letters, copies of every document related to my education fund, and a sealed letter addressed to me. My hands trembled as I opened it. My dearest Ethan, Grandma wrote, you were never the disappointment. You were the strongest person in our family. Tears blurred my vision as I read on. She revealed that my father had repeatedly asked her for money before she died, and that she had secretly kept copies of every bank record because she feared he might betray me. Her final words were unmistakable. If your father ever tells you I approved of using your education fund for anyone else, he is lying. That money belongs to you. Always remember, being related to someone doesn't make them family. Love does. Mrs. Lewis then handed me a flash drive Grandma had also left behind. That evening, I watched the recording alone. Grandma appeared on the screen, weak but smiling. She warned me not to spend my life chasing an apology and reminded me that some people protect their pride more than the people they love. She told me I never needed anyone's approval, praised my kindness and honesty, and left me with one final lesson. If your family ever comes back into your life, don't ask whether they deserve forgiveness. Ask whether they've earned your trust. When the video ended, I sat in silence, realizing forgiveness didn't require forgetting, and helping someone didn't mean allowing them to hurt me again. The next morning, Ryan sent a warning. Dad knows about the meeting with Mom. He's furious. He's planning something. Please be careful. I looked at Grandma's photograph and whispered, I kept my promise. I never gave up. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid anymore. The truth was finally on my side, and sooner or later, the truth always finds its way into the light. Chapter 9. The Choice That Changed Everything. Ryan's warning stayed with me, so before facing my family, I visited Mr. Harper. After listening quietly, he asked me one simple question. If they weren't related to you, would you loan them a single dollar? I answered without hesitation. No, he smiled. Then you've already made your decision. Before I left, he gave me one final piece of advice. Helping people isn't wrong, but sacrificing your peace to rescue those who refuse to change. That's self-destruction. The next day, I met my family at the old house. Dad immediately pushed loan papers toward me. Pay these off and we can save the house. Instead of opening them, I placed Grandma's leather box on the table. Inside were her letters and the records proving she had never approved of using my education fund. As Mom read Grandma's words aloud, tears filled her eyes. Ryan and Emma stood in stunned silence. Dad refused to admit he had done anything wrong. Finally, he looked at me. So what now? I took a deep breath. I won't pay your debts. Dad scoffed, but I continued. I will help Mom and Emma find a place to live if they need one. I'll help Ryan rebuild his life, but I won't give anyone money, and I won't rescue anyone from the consequences of their choices. For the first time, Ryan stood beside me. I'm with Ethan. Emma nodded. So am I. Mom looked at Dad. I should have stood up for Ethan 10 years ago. I'm not making that mistake again. For the first time in his life, Dad stood completely alone. As I walked to the door, I turned back one last time. I forgive you. He looked surprised, but forgiveness doesn't erase consequences, and it doesn't rebuild trust. I walked outside into the light rain. 10 years earlier, I had left that house with one suitcase and $47. This time, I left with something far more valuable: peace. As I drove away, Mr. Harper texted me, "Whatever decision you made, I hope it brought you freedom." I smiled. For the first time in years, I wasn't leaving because I had been thrown away. I was leaving because I finally understood that some doors are meant to stay closed. Chapter 10. The Family I Chose. 1 year later, life looked completely different. Not because I had more money, but because I finally had peace. Every morning I woke up in a home filled with calm instead of criticism. Grandma used to say, "The sunrise doesn't ask permission to shine. It simply does." For years I searched for my family's approval. I finally realized I never needed it. My business continued to grow, but the success I was proudest of was creating a workplace where every person was treated with respect. No one was made to feel like they weren't enough. Ryan rebuilt his life without asking me for money. Instead, he asked for advice. We stopped living as rivals and finally became brothers. Emma returned to school to become a teacher because she wanted children to grow up believing they were enough. Mom never asked me for financial help again. She asked for something harder: time. Slowly, she accepted responsibility for the past, and little by little, trust began to grow again. Dad's life changed the most. He lost the house, took a smaller apartment, and worked a simple job. Nearly a year later, he visited my office carrying Grandma's old silver pocket watch. For the first time in my life, he looked at me and quietly said, "I was wrong. I spent so much time trying to make one son successful that I failed the one who already was. I'm sorry." The apology didn't erase the past, but it mattered because it was honest. I told him I had already forgiven him, though forgiveness could never erase the consequences. 3 months later, Dad passed away peacefully. At his funeral, I shared the lesson my life had taught me. I used to believe success meant proving someone wrong, but success isn't wealth or revenge. It's becoming someone your younger self would finally feel safe with. Every generation has a choice. We either pass our pain on or we end it. I choose to end it. That evening, I visited Grandma's grave and thanked her for believing in me when no one else did. I finally understood what she had been trying to teach me all along. Family isn't the people who share your last name. Family is the people who protect your heart. If you've ever been made to feel like you'll never be enough, remember this. Your worth has never been determined by the people who failed to see it. The greatest victory isn't making them regret losing you. It's building a life filled with so much peace, purpose, and love that their opinion no longer defines who you are. Because in the end, the boy they called a failure didn't become successful by proving them wrong. He became successful the moment he finally believed they had been wrong about him all along.